Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Santa Barbara County Local Agency Formation Commission for Thursday, May 4th. It's now 1 p.m. If I could have roll call, please.
Commissioner Seves?
Here.
Commissioner Geyer? Commissioner Hartman? Commissioner Ishkanian? Commissioner Lavanino? Commissioner Morehouse? Commissioner Richardson? Commissioner Stark? Commissioner Waterfield?
Here.
Commissioner Welt?
Here.
Commissioner Wolf? Let the record reflect that Commissioner Richardson is absent.
And Mr. Chair, just for the record, also Ms. Waterfield in Santa Maria then would be a voting member until Mr. Richardson goes up. Thank you.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Waterfield.
Great, got it.
Waterfield, you're the voting member. Okay.
All right, I will listen in closely.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America, and to the for which it stands, nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, any questions on the minutes? If not, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 13th?
I'll move them as presented.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Commissioner Geyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavanino? Commissioner Morehouse? Commissioner Welt?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield?
Aye.
Chair Seves?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And now is the point of our agenda for the persons to address the commission on items not on this afternoon's agenda. Do we have any speaker slips?
Chair Seves and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on general public comment.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar, we have the disbursements for March and April. Does anybody request to pull them? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Actually, I don't need that, do I? I do need that. Okay, motion approved.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. No discussion. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Geyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Lavanino?
Aye.
Commissioner Morehouse? Commissioner Welt?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf? Commissioner Waterfield?
Aye.
Chair Seves?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Let's move on to business item number 1.
Chair Seves and members of the commission, business item number 1 is to consider recommendations regarding the final budget for fiscal year 2017 through 2018.
Mr. Hood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Hood, LAFCO Executive Officer. I have a brief PowerPoint. In terms of the proposed budget, LAFCO has responsibilities in the CKH Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act about approving proposed and the final budget. The Government Code Section 56381 requires LAFCO to, after conducting a public hearing, to adopt a proposed budget no later than May 1st. And your commission last meeting on April 13th approved the proposed budget, and that proposed budget was transmitted to the county, each city, and each independent special district for their review and comment. We did not receive any comments. The commission is required to adopt the final budget by June 15th. We're about over a month ahead of that schedule, so I try and get the proposed and final budget to your commission with adequate time for review by the funding agencies and by the commission. Your commission did note, and I pointed out last month when the proposed budget was submitted, that the final budget is $453,558, and there's an increase of about $74,000 over the current year budget. And that did raise a couple of eyebrows, and we had some discussion after I consulted with the County Auditor Controller's Office about why this amount increased so much for countywide overhead. And that was explained in an attachment to the staff report, and your commission had some questions last month, and we have a representative, Kyle Slater, who's in the audience today, to respond to the countywide overhead charges, the CAP program, and why the budget increased so much. The billing is also going to be lower thanks to our legal counsel, who is now billing at a lower rate for county council services. This is essentially the summary of the budget, and in the staff report I go over each one of the line items in some detail and provide information to you about what is included in the line item. And you can see that the budget will increase, total appropriations will go up close to $75,000, and revenues will go up close to $75,000. And the balancing factor in this is the billings to the local agencies in terms of revenues. So what I do is balance the bottom line to the funding that's available from the county, the cities, and the special districts, and that's how we make the budget balance. So I'd recommend that the commission, first of all, accept all public testimony regarding the final budget, which again was sent out to all of the funding agencies, and direct staff to distribute the approved final budget to the cities, special districts, and the county, and notify the county auditor about the amount of the appropriation, and the county will then proceed to send out the billings to the funding agencies. And sometimes it's a little harder to get the funding agencies, especially the smaller districts. We still had about 5 districts as of a couple of weeks ago that hadn't paid their funds to the commission. And so we followed up and with them, and I think all of them now have provided the funding for the current year budget, and we'll follow up next year with the 17-18 budget. So with that, I have, if there's any questions you might have, I'd be happy to respond to them. And we have a representative of the county auditor's office and also the retired auditor controller who's in the audience, that I said that if we really need help getting to the bottom of the CAP program, that he could respond to that. I'm actually just kidding, but I'd be happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Okay, before we go to the questions, just let everybody know that Mr. Richardson has now joined us, and Commissioner Waterfield, you are now fired. Actually, not the voting member.
Well, that was short-lived. Thank you. Jim, your tires are going to be flat when you go outside.
Okay, any questions, Mr. Geyer?
Well, first off, could you email me a copy of this PowerPoint so that I could distribute that out?
Yeah, it's actually on the website, but I can email
Yeah,
it
if I
to
could
you.
get that.
Okay.
I think that this explanation, I received more phone calls about this budget than I did any LAFCO item since I've ever been on. This helps a little bit, but it raises one question for me. If the increase mainly was in clerk and council, that I understand. 55,000 in clerking changes, can that be somewhat broken down a little bit? I mean, 10,000 for this and 20,000 for that or something. I mean, that is a big change in 1 year. And I realize that it's more noticeable because there was credits a year before, but the fact is it's still a $55,000 increase.
It could be, it is actually broken down in the explanation of the variances. And I'd defer back to the, it's on Exhibit B, where you look at the breakdowns by category. It's in the back behind the, right in front of the budget spreadsheet. Right, yeah, it was not intentional to make that microscopic, but that's the way it ended up. And it talks about the changes going back to the 08-09 budget for county council and the county executive office, and then the rollovers and adjustment. But we have a representative of the auditor in the audience, and maybe he can explain that.
Right, but those columns on Exhibit B really don't explain the $50,000 or 55 or whatever it is.
There's if you look at the roll, oh well, I'll let I'll come up and explain that.
Good afternoon, Chair Sevis, members of the commission. I am Kyle Slattery, Division Chief in the Auditor Controller's Office. So that Schedule B that we're referring to here does show the total on the far right of $55,000. It also shows in each column the components of that $55,000 amount. Seems most of the focus right now is on, the amount shown in the County Executive Clerk Services column, which is just under $14,000. And also there's the County Council Legal Services column, just over $11,000. So those amounts there represent differences between the actual costs that were incurred providing those services and the billings that the commission received during the year. Then we get to our subtotal of just under $30,000, which would be the components of the current year cost. Then the larger amount we're seeing here is this roll forward amount, $25,000. And so that is actually a calculation of the difference between what we estimated the cost would be and what it actually turned out being. So each year we use last year's actual costs to estimate what those costs are going to be next. When we get to that next year, we see what those actual costs are, and we calculate that difference. And that's what's included in the roll forward amount.
Okay, so the 79,000 then, does it winds up being the 55 on the top column for 17, 18, and then the credit for the 24?
In the prior year,
Yeah. So you're making up that credit?
so in the prior year, the commission received a credit of just under
Yeah,
$25,000.
that's what I thought. But in the PowerPoint, it says it was 55,000 plus another 28 for council. But on this, the 55,000 includes council.
Yes, so in the line item we're talking about here, which would be the countywide cost allocation plan amount, it includes this difference in what was actually billed and what the costs were. You likely have another line item in your budget, which is just the budget for the billing that will occur for these services.
So we get two billings for?
It's a true-up mechanism, so it captures any difference between what was actually billed and what the actual cost incurred by the county to provide those services were. Yes, and it is 2 years previous, and so it's a long-term true-up mechanism.
Mr. Richardson.
Can somebody help me define a reasonable amount for a contingency fund versus the overall budget? The contingency fund will run up to 28% of the budget. With the $20,000, it's at 25% right now. Is it necessary to increase it? Or is there a rule of thumb for a contingency to budget kind of number?
I look at the prudent reserves as between 30 and 40% of the operating budget. I think it's prudent to have money in reserve for the reasons I mentioned at the last meeting, that for unexpected expenses, for instance, legal defense funds, if we have a lawsuit that may be filed. And also, I was looking at your staffing some way in the future, sometime in the future. I'm working on a 2-year contract extension, but you may need to rethink that if you go out and recruit for someone that's not available to serve on a contract basis. So it's, I don't think it's really high, in regards to having reserves that are necessary if we have, a rainy day fund or something that needs to be expended during the year that we need to transfer money. I don't expect to keep doing this until we have 100% of our budget. I think 30 to 40%, 28% is reasonable in my view.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any members of the public that want to address this issue?
Chair Sevis and members of the commission, there are no requests to speak on this item.
Okay, back to commission for deliberations. Mr. Morehouse.
I have a question. In your report, you say that after the April 13th commission thing was transmitted to certain people, one is special district managers. Was this transmitted to the newly formed IV district? And what about Santa Rita Hills? And a second question to that, did Santa Rita Hills pay last year or any of the previous years? They currently money.
The first part, are they owing money? They don't have a budget, so they're billed based on the budget proportionally to all of the districts in the county. So the districts that have the largest budget, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but Goleta Water District is the largest, and they pay the most. Yeah, they pay 1/3 of the 1/3 billed to district. I don't think the Isla Vista CSD was billed. They may have been informed. I don't know. Are they on our mailing list, Jacqueline? Yeah, we'd have to check on that. But they would not be billed because they don't have any revenue. So if you compare them to all of the districts in the county, they'd be at the very bottom because they have a zero budget. So they would not be required to pay anything.
So that doesn't answer my question about Santa Rita Hills, though.
They would not be
Have they
billed.
been billed? Do they owe money?
They would have been billed when they were an active district, and they, as far as I know, don't owe any money, because I looked at the districts that were owing. There was about 5 districts included, and they were not one of those, because I don't think they were billed last year because they didn't have a budget. So we're looking at the 16-17, now we're looking at the 17-18 budget, and the auditor will do a comparison of the total amount of revenues and the amount of the budgets for each district, and then they're billed accordingly.
So you said there's 5 districts that haven't paid?
They have paid now. One of them was the Rec and Parks District in Isla Vista, and they have sent us a check. And there was a couple. The Carpinteria Sanitary District was one of the ones I recall, and there was an MID, and there was, I think, a cemetery district. Those are the ones that just come to my mind. But they have been notified, and they do not owe very much money. If you look at the budget, if you look at the quarterly report, that they owe like less than 2% of the total budget, but they still owe money, so that we need to bill them. And there's certainly is a way of, if they don't pay, if we want to go to that extreme, that LAFCO could require that the auditor withhold money from their budgets, because most of the districts, are funded and keep their budgets in the county treasury. So if we wanted to do that, sometimes it's not worth the effort, but for the larger districts, it is if they don't pay.
Mr. Guyer.
I assume that the billing comes off the previous year's budgets, correct?
What happens is, it's the state controller's report for concerning financial transactions of special districts. And it goes back, it's 2 years back. So again, it's like the funding for the countywide overhead. The latest state controller's report is the one that the county auditor uses for billings.
Well, the proportional amount that a special district pays comes off their previous year's budget, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's
Right.
it's 2 years back.
So it would be easy to bill Santa Rita Hills, because they did have a budget at one time. But my understanding is that there's no warrants being paid. No warrants are being paid.
Okay. Anybody else? All in? Is there a motion to approve staff recommendation?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the final budget, distribute the budget to the county, cities, and special districts, and to notify the county auditor to proceed pursuant to the government code 56381.6. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Guyer? Commissioner Lavanino?
Aye.
Commissioner Morehouse? Commissioner Richardson? Commissioner Welt?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Chair Seves?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Kyle. Moving on to business item number 2.
Chair Seves and members of the commission, business item number 2 is to consider recommendations regarding LAFCO legislation.
Mr. Chairman, I have a PowerPoint for this one as well. I think it'd be easier to look at it on the screen when we go over these bills. We had a meeting about a month ago on April 12th. The Santa Barbara LAFCO Legislative Committee held its first meeting on Wednesday prior to the commission meeting in Santa Maria. And we identified several bills that are pending that could have an impact on LAFCO statewide and Santa Barbara LAFCO. And we also looked at the list of bills from the Cal LAFCO Legislative Committee. And we didn't really have time to agendize any of these bills because, as I mentioned, the commission regular meeting was the next day on the 13th. So the commission directed me to come back at the next meeting, which is today, with a list of legislative bills. And so I've identified, I think, 5 or 6 bills that I'd like to get your direction on. The first one is one that we discussed briefly, and since it was not agendized last month, it's Assembly Bill 722 by Assembly Person Limon, and it has to do with county apportionments for the Isla Vista CSD Board. And I would like you to, and you wanted as well, to make a recommendation and send the letter of opposition on the bill. And the bill deals with the incompatible office issue for the member representing the County Board of Supervisors who sits on the Isla Vista Community Services District Board. And AB 722 essentially determines that an appointment of a member, particularly a Board of Supervisor member by the Board of Supervisors, is not an incompatible office. And some of the members of our legislative committee wanted to have the commission's decision on this and send a letter of opposition. So I'll close my comments, and Mr. Chairman, you can bring it back to the commission for discussion at this point.
Questions of the commission to Mr. Hood on Senate Bill 722? Questions? Is there a motion to approve the recommendation on Assembly Bill 722? We can have discussion if we have the motion.
Yeah, I actually have a comment on the bill.
You have a question to Mr. Hood on the bill itself?
Well, my question to Mr. Hood is the reason for the opposition. I'm not sure that I understood the reason for the opposition to the.
There's a couple of reasons for that the legislative committee had. One is that the commission in general opposed AB3. It was a bill that was that circumvented the LAFCO process. And so it was pretty clear that even though the bill was moving through the legislature, that the commission did not support the bill based on a majority vote of the commission. Second item is that there is, I think, some determination on the part of the special districts, and they can speak for themselves, obviously, that having a Board of Supervisors appoint membership to a special district, even though this is a special case with AB3, it was not your typical formation process, but there is a part of the bill that says there will be elected members that need to be within the boundaries of the district, but there's also an appointment by UC Board of Regents for a UC representative and by the Board of Supervisors for a county representative. And currently, Robert Geis serves as the appointee for the Board of Supervisors. And I'm not sure what else. It was, mainly the opposition to AB3 and the process that went through. Leaving out LAFCO as far as approval.
Okay, let's go to the commission for discussion, and then we do have a public comment that I just received a notice on. So, Guyer.
Well, my reason for supporting a letter of opposition to it is because, it's circumventing LAFCO, but mainly when I read the legislative interpretation of incompatible office. It's a very serious thing. I don't take it lightly.
Mr. Morehouse.
Yeah, I'm one of the ones that was in the, on the legislative committee and felt it should come to the full commission to discuss. But there's no doubt it's an incompatible office, and California State Legislature, just by inking it on a piece of paper is going to say it. Well, no, it's not, because we say it's not. And I don't think that's fair to other special districts to just arbitrarily say that we're gonna close our eyes to this and say it's an incompatible office when in fact it is. Also, bypassing the LAFCO process. I'm starting to wonder. Actually, the Little Hoover Commission has finally picked up on this as a result of AB3. Although they didn't point out to it, but as a result of AB3, the Little Hoover Commission is now looking at the concern about the California State Legislature involving themselves in the formation of local government. We have a few more bills that we'll be discussing here. We'll discuss later. The Little Hoover Commission talking about this issue. When AB3 was going through the process, I specifically asked one of the questions and was told, well, the question was, if the CSD forms, but they don't pay, or vote to pay for the taxes, is any county funds going to be expended? And I had witnesses from the county sitting here, coming here saying, no county funds will be expended. So now, through the state legislatures, through some local representation here that asked them to do this, we now will be spending county funds on personnel and a board of supervisor to be sitting on a board. And that was a specific question that we were told no. And the people voted. People voted to form this CSD. They had every right during that time to create how they wanted this CSD to be formed. They voted on it. And now the state legislature is stepping in once again and saying, oh, well, we're going to have a blind eye, and we're going to go ahead and allow an incompatible office holder to be part of that CSD too. It's just fundamentally not correct. It's not right. And quite frankly, the Board of Supervisors have the ability to appoint a citizen, which they've done. In fact, that appointee's here today. They did a fine appointment. So why mess that up? Let the citizens run the CSD. And let the Board of Supervisors run the county and not involve themselves in trying to run a special district. And I think they did a fine appointment by Mr. Geis. And I don't want to see him replaced by Board of Supervisor. That's just a few of the reasons.
Mr. Lavanito and then Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think it was important to bring it back to the entire board for a vote, but my issues somewhat line up with Mr. Morehouse. But I think County Council informed us that, when we were asking if it was legal compatible office, he said, well, if the legislature says it is, then it becomes compatible. So it's up to them, although for me, it just doesn't, for me, it originally didn't pass the test, but then I also went back and was reminded of all the other times that we as Board of Supervisors sit on other commissions and we have to change hats. My main reason for opposition was twofold. One is to remain consistent. We opposed AB3. And number two was it's just not what the voters voted on. So they voted for a certain makeup of this CSD. And I think now to switch it 6 months after, just, I'd rather see it go back to a vote of the people. If that's what we want to do, then, it's not like this CSD is going to be formed without the tax. It's not going to really do anything anyway, so there's plenty of time to put that on the ballot with the tax again. So that's where I think it needs to go.
Mr. Richardson.
Now, I appreciate the discussion but I don't have a real definition in my mind what an incompatible office means. What's it incompatible with? Can I get an answer?
Mr. Dillon.
It's a statute.
If there's no statute speaking to the issue, and a person such as yourself, say, wants to sit on LAFCO and on the city council of your city, then there has to be an analysis. If there's no statute saying you can do it, and in your case, there is a statute. But if there is no statute, the analysis is along the lines of whether or not one position is subservient to another, and whether or not you have divided loyalties when you sit on one city council versus LAFCO commission. And it's a common law test of, is it fair and reasonable for a person to try to put those two different, to do those two different jobs and wear two different hats at different points in time. And especially it's an issue if one position serves at the direction and possible, orders or penalties of the other. So that it can be just inherently incompatible in certain situations to put a person in that position. So under common law, certain positions have been held to be incompatible. But the thing about incompatibility of offices is the legislature has total authority to change common law. And if the legislature wants to, through a statute, say that two positions may be held by one person, and as an example, LAFCO, of course, you've got special district members, you got supervisors and city council persons. We don't have to do an incompatible office analysis there because the legislature answered the question when they adopted the Cortese-Knox Act and said, here's who may be on LAFCO. Same thing happens at APCD. Some of you have two hats and sit on APCD. The supervisors do, and sometimes some of you have been on the district board. It's a different issue on the SBCAG. That's a JPA, but there's also some analysis that allows who has to be worn when you're on a JPA like SBCAG. But if the legislature speaks to it and says it's compatible, then that, unless there's a constitutional issue, that typically ends the inquiry. If we do an analysis in my office of compatibility, first thing we do is we look for a statute that authorizes it. And if we find one, that's usually the end of the analysis.
In short, compatibility means you can serve on two different boards?
Right. And the legislature has plenary control over that issue.
What they're saying in this case is that it's not reasonable to have a supervisor serve on the Isla Vista board. Is that what it's saying?
No, right now I don't think the statute really speaks to it. So they want to amend, the county wants to suggest the legislature amend the CSD law and explicitly allow one appointment to be a supervisor or somebody else who works for the county.
So that it's not incompatible.
Right, and that would basically end the inquiry.
Convoluted line.
There's a policy argument to be made. I'm not suggesting you don't want to have the argument about whether it's good policy, and that's, I think, where a lot of the concerns are, but I don't think it would be incompatible if the legislature says it's okay.
Thank you very much for that.
Mr. Dillon, let me pick up on what you just said. As I read the proposed legislation, there's really no changes other than adding that the county may appoint one of their own to serve on the special district. But if you go to on to the third page where it talks about on line 29 where it talks about the special district contracting with a county or the regions for additional police protection services, I think it puts the let's say they put a board of supervisor member on the special district. It puts them in a very difficult position in that as a board of supervisor, you're approving the sheriff's contract, and then you can enhance that contract through the special districts contracting with the county, and that one person would be able to vote on both. If the legislature says it's not incompatible, I think it falls back to a common sense issue. But that's not considered part of incompatibility.
It's a question of what the statute authorizes, period. There is a rational basis test for statutes, but that's a pretty easily satisfied test. But other than that, legislature has complete control in this area.
And that was just the one area I picked up. I didn't go through the whole legislation to find where the other areas that I would apply that are incompatible. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I think, if I might, the chair has reported that the statute is slightly broader than it's shown on the board. It applies, I think, to any county public officer of the county. But I think that's a technicality. I might suggest that the LAFCO consider taking a duck on this statute. It's it's really a county issue as to who the county might appoint, rather than sort of a good government issue. I can understand why we wouldn't like this statute in the first place because of the end run around LAFCO, but that the horse is pretty much out of the barn, and the question is whether you want to modify the horse a little bit. I guess reasonable people can differ whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, but we might consider at least not wading into this any more than we have to.
Ms. Hartman,
Mr. Chair, may I make my
Mr. Chair?
comments after public comment?
after public. Well, we'll go back. Okay, let's go to public comment unless somebody else has a.
One question, would a board of supervisor sitting on that Isla Vista board have to recuse him or herself for every budget issue, as you mentioned in your example,
I would
with the
think-
salary for the sheriff,
I
for
would think they'd be
instance?
full voting members if they're appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
There's why the conflict of interest sort of thing.
Okay, let's go to public comment.
Hey, Mr. Chair, Roger Welt in Santa Maria.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Roger.
Thank you. Thank you. This is deja vu for me. This reminds me of our conversations around AB3, and I have to support a letter of opposition regarding Bill 722. I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think that we should be in a position where we support this bill. I strongly believe that it's important for us to take a position on this at this time. I also pulled down the newsletter from the California Special Districts, and Commissioner Morehouse made reference to the Little Hoover position, their position, and that is that I feel good about that. That looks like it's got some possibility to support us when we make decisions regarding our local areas. Thank you.
Okay. Public comment.
Chair Seves and members of the commission, we have 3 requests to speak on this item, and we are going to begin with Robert Geis, to be followed by Jay Freeman.
Chairman Seves, members of the commission, I have a little bit of history on this issue, but I'll start with, I was sent here by the Isla Vista Community Services District Board as the representative to support that our board supported SB 722. It was a 6-to-1 vote. Another public speaker will probably be the one that was in opposition, Director Freeman. Early on in this, this process, I was kind of surprised that a county representative or a board of supervisors couldn't be appointed. And I said, well, that's wrong, because I was the guy that went to the formation committee when they were doing it, and I was the one that was pushing that UCSB and the county have a representative on that district. I thought it was a good idea because, that's what we're there. We're coordinating services between UCSB and the county, and we're transferring some of the county services over to the IVCSD. So I was just kind of go, oh, and then they said incompatible office, and I go, oh, I get that statute too. So then I understood. At that point, I wasn't considering being a board member. They wanted me to be the general manager of the district, and I said, I'm not going to take on all that work. But then, I finally went back and said, well, if everybody else is incompatible, I probably could do some good for the district to bring it along in its formation process. And I volunteered, and I think I was the only applicant in that process. So, I'm in the throes of that agency and working with that agency, and there's some really, really bright directors. It is this combination of, 5 local elected members, the UCSB, which has a big, big impact on that whole community, and the county, who provides a lot of services there. So, the structure is very unique. It's probably the only special district in California that is organized like this. And, it required special legislation. And, I kind of go, yeah, we bypassed LAFCO, but that happened. Now we need to come back to LAFCO for a lot of things in the future, the future of that district. You really think of a community services district. Is it going to be a future city? Is it going to be a future community services district that does city-type services? Are we going to bring those services closer to the people that are living in that community and deal with those services or lack of every day? So, I'm not going to, I committed to a 2-year appointment, and I'm not going to be here very long. I'm not going to serve the rest of my career on this district. I volunteered to get them started, and I hope that someone closer to the current administration of the county could be appointed to this. I think it would be good.
Our next speaker is Jay Freeman, to be followed by Jonathan Aboud. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Jay Freeman. I'm also from the board of the Isla Vista Community Service District, but I am not here representing them today. There was a 6-to-1 vote on our board to widely support AB 722. I was the one. First of all, I would like to say that yes, the legislature can decide what is incompatible, but the whole point of this conversation is to decide on recommendations to the legislature for what would make sense. I don't quite understand why it keeps coming back to whether the legislature has the power to do this. The question is whether the legislature should do this. So I'd like to provide some background on these positions because I think it's really important. One of the goals was to involve the university and the county in order to make them invested. I will always point out that you make people feel invested in something by giving them stock, not by putting them on your board. I do realize that these are just 2 votes, but even that, being on a board gives you influence, and this is why conflict of interests, financial conflict of interest, must recuse themselves, not abstain from votes. One big argument was that it makes them feel responsible for decisions. I had pointed out that this would, in practice, you can always defer decisions back to your masters if you're appointed to a board. During these initial meetings, I was one of the people who said, let's put the decision maker in the hot seat. Let's get the chancellor or a supervisor. But now I see that that isn't even good enough. Last night, I was at the sit-in that was being done with the chancellor's office, and he can just defer to the academic senate in the same way that a supervisor has no unilateral power, can always defer back to the board of supervisors themselves. George Thurlow, who was appointed from the chancellor's from the university to our board, can defer to the chancellor. And this is similar if we were to appoint a high-up staffer in the county to our board, is similar to George Thurlow's position. You can imagine what could happen if the head of public works ends up on our board. We all heart skip, but you got the problem that you have this confusing issue over what happens with the negotiations. If nothing else, it leads to issues over funding. It is extremely awkward to have to rely on the county. Doesn't work for staffers. I say it's broken for officials. In practice, this leads to conflicts of interest. George even just this week explained that he serves 2 masters. I do not envy his position. I understand that this is hard and that everyone now feels that he is tainted on both sides. It makes negotiations hard or impossible. The university insists that George negotiates for them on their side, but now we run into quorum issues when we try to have negotiators coming in to have to talk with people from the university because we can't send many people. These laws are the way they are for a reason. When Hertzberg came here in order to hear from our AB3 commission, he was actually surprised by this part because of these 2 positions because DAS did not explain that to him. The way the law was written is actually better. Having Bob Geist not be a direct report is very useful. It lets him talk with as many people as he wants, and lets it talk with different people without limits. And if anything, we should clarify the university's position. And finally, we have talked here about the intent of this position. The intent here, when they say it is meaningless, it is not the legislature's intent. They wrote what they wanted. And it was not unanimous at the AB3 meetings. And in fact, one of the people who was in support of this position apologized to me because they voted for this. They really just wanted an older, stable person on the board. They didn't realize it would run into these problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just like with anything, Jay, you get 1 out of 2 with Bob, so.
Our final speaker is Jonathan Aboud.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here again. It's been a year. I just want to say that in the history of AB3 being written, it was a law that passed, whether or not this body supported it, but the original intent was to have the supervisor. That was all the conversations that happened. If they had put that comma that a supervisor is not an incompatible office, then this wouldn't even be an issue, but no one thought of that. So that was the original intent of the law when it was being lobbied for. that's what people understood was going to happen. So I think that this is just a routine change and not too much, because this is what people thought. I think it's also been very beneficial to have someone from the UCSB administration, someone who's actually in the apparatus on our board. So having someone from the county apparatus actually on our board would work much better. Bob was a lucky find. You're not always going to find someone who just worked as the auditor controller for so many years, then be on your board who already knows everyone at the county. So the next county appointment, I think we would really benefit from having it be someone who works at the county or who is elected to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we're going to go to Commissioner Hartman, and then we'll go to deliberation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recognize that LAFCO's long had concerns about the IVCSD's creation through the legislature rather than through LAFCO itself. IV, as you know, though, is a very special case in the county and in the state. Most CSDs, at least in my supervisorial district, and that includes Los Alamos, San Ynez, Vandenberg Village, Mission Hills, and Casmalia, serve small townships, and they focus on just a few services. But Isla Vista is one of the most diverse and densely populated urban areas in Santa Barbara County, and it has an even greater need for services and infrastructure than other unincorporated areas of our county. County government really wasn't designed for and doesn't have the tools needed to finance and manage the large, densely populated urban areas. Over the years, 7 different reports called for formation of a CSD, including a 2002 grand jury report, Who's in Charge, and the trustees report of 2014. The services tax and board representation in the IVCSD were all different than typically seen by LAFCO. So the IVCSD was created not by LAFCO, but by state government. The question we have before us today has to do with the representation on the IVCSD. And while we note that 5 members are elected by voters registered in Isla Vista, 1 is appointed by UCSB and 1 by the county. The intent was, as you've heard from Mr. Aboud, that the appointed directors would speak not for their own personal interests, but those of the institution they represent. As Mr. Dillon noted, there actually is, not beyond common law, there is a statute, California Government Code Regulation then 1099A, that deals with incompatible offices. And generally they are incompatible if they have supervisory powers over another office or body, or there's a clash of duties or loyalties, or there's a public policy consideration that would make it improper. But there are exceptions. The courts have found that the California legislature may abrogate this section and hold incompatible offices actually compatible so that a single person could hold 2. It's made this exception, and this is the test, when a person would serve as a representative of one office or where the purpose of the dual membership is for the person to provide institutional expertise or assistance. That's clearly the case for the IVCSD. As Mr. Dillon also noted, board members, supervisors serve on the APCD and on the retirement board, the RDA successor agency, and even SBCAG. Those are all examples. But I'd like to read from the state AG's opinion on this because I think it brings it close to home. From the composition of LAFCO and its duties, it is patent that the local public officers who serve thereon will routinely be called upon to consider and pass upon matters which vitally affect their respective public agencies. Under the common law, the office of a member of LAFCO and that of a county, city, or district officer would accordingly be incompatible and could not be held concurrently. The legislature, however, may and often does abrogate the common law doctrine when it considers it necessary and convenient to permit officers to hold incompatible offices. With respect to LAFCO, it has done just that by requiring county, city, and district officers to serve upon LAFCOs. Accordingly, officers holding incompatible offices under legislative authorization may fully perform the duties of both offices despite conflicts of loyalties which may arise. I believe that the drafters of AB3 and the majority of those who participated in the 40-plus community meetings on the IVCSD believed it was necessary and convenient to allow a member to serve both the county and the IVCSD. The point was not to give the Board of Supervisors freedom to choose anyone from the public and dilute the voting power of the elected IVCSD directors from Isla Vista. It was specifically to bring counties' expertise and assistance and to represent not their own personal opinion, but to bring representation for the county and in the counterpart, UCSB. As noted, we currently have Bob Geis. He's a superb person, but we're thinking on out into the future, and somebody of his caliber may not always be available. When the County Board of Supervisors put out the notice for application for this role, they decided not to just make it for IV residents, but countywide, so we could get the best possible pool of applicants. And that's what this amendment to AB3 would do. I would like to bring to your attention that it was voted yesterday out of committee 8-1. Thank you.
Which committee was that?
I'm the Assembly Committee with Monique Lamone, Government Affairs or Local Government.
Okay, let's go to deliberations, and then we'll go to where we're going. Mr. Geyer.
I spent a little bit of time on special districts, and one of the things that I feel that I know is that when you take a job as a director, you're voted in, you're not there to represent any one body or any one person or yourself. And it's the same thing on LAFCO. We're here to take our hat off, serve as a whole. I don't think anybody that's appointed should represent the university, their position. It should be an independent person, and the same with the county.
Mr. Morehouse.
Yeah, once again, I'll state that I strongly oppose the position. Well, actually, I support the position that I believe that this is an incompatible office. And as far as what Commissioner Hartman was speaking about in comparing LAFCO to the situation of IV, it's much different, because nobody up here sits here because we were elected here by the citizens of this county. We were appointed by the districts, city, or county that we serve for, and that's what the legislature did when they stated that this is not an incompatible office, because we're not elected by the people of the county to be sitting on LAFCO. Instead, we're appointed by the bodies we serve on, which is much different. IV is a body of primarily elected officials. It would be even better if IV was only represented by elected officials, and that the people from UCSB and the county appointee were just there as non-voting members to provide expertise. You don't have to be voting to provide expertise. If you want to provide expertise, then go to their meetings and provide expertise comment, provide input. But there's really no reason that we need to say yes, that we agree that we support the notion of incompatible offices. And being a special district person, I just don't want to see this cascade throughout the state of California of the legislature thinking that they can now appoint county board of supervisors to special districts throughout the state of California. AB3 has already created a cascading of the legislature bypassing LAFCO and creating special districts. So, maybe it's going to probably pass through this legislature, because that's the way the legislature is working right now. But I think that we need to take a position of opposing it.
Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair?
Chair. I don't think that, in my opinion, that this is so much related to AB3 because every time it came to LAFCO, I was supportive of the legislature moving forward with AB3 and letting the citizens vote. I think when and I had looked at this many times, and there was I think I always was under the impression, but I think wrongly, that the Board of Supervisors would appoint the supervisor for the district. But as Supervisor Lavicino pointed out, there was information from County Council, and this whole issue of incompatible office came up. I understand that the legislature can change that for this particular body, but when I really started to get into the issues of incompatible office, and I thank you, Mr. Morehouse. I think what you said is a good point. That, for instance, I sit on the retirement board, but I was appointed by our board, or I sit on this commission, but I was appointed by our board. I wasn't elected, and so I think that's a significant difference. This is really a policy issue. I don't feel comfortable with this kind of. If I was to make a suggestion on this whole voting issue, it would be that a representative from the Board of Supervisors, or just be stated that it's the supervisor of the district, and someone from the university sit in an advisory position, and every other member be elected at large from within the district. I just think, as time has gone on, that would be the change that I think makes the most sense. So it's really difficult for me to support this bill, because it from a policy perspective, it doesn't appear to be a good thing. And I think the Board of Supervisors did a fine job in securing Mr. Geis, and in looking at the letter that was date of a hearing that was May 3rd, and there was an argument in support from Supervisor Williams, who wrote this bill at the time. He said two of the most important things were that the appointee would create stability on the board of a community with a high turnover of college residents, and it would require a consistent presence of both the county and the university, regardless of leadership change. Well, actually, leadership changes do happen on the Board of Supervisors, so there never is a guarantee of who would be that representative. It just feels much better to me if it was the community who votes for their representatives, and not having the county and UCSB be the appointing authority. So,
Commissioner Welt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hood, can you remind us, did Cal LAFCO take a position on AB 722?
No, they didn't. I talked about this with the executive director of Cal LAFCO, and they looked on it as an issue that was a Santa Barbara LAFCO and county issue rather than statewide significance.
Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
Well, I want to make a couple comments first, and we'll take the motion. And I'm going to repeat a couple things that were said just to reemphasize it. But first of all, in all the hearings we had on AB3, there was never, ever, ever discussion about having the County Board of Supervisors appoint one of their own to serve. if it had come up during the hearings, we would have saved ourselves a good part of an hour, because we would have dealt with it then as far as. Our biggest issue for us was how AB3 circumvented the LAFCO. And we as LAFCO representatives had to take that very personally. And we were established by state law for a specific reason. And we hold those mandates seriously. As was mentioned, we serve the entire county as LAFCO representatives. We don't serve our individual districts, cities, or supervisorial districts. We're countywide, and that's why the state made it so that we can act countywide. There is no reason why the county and UCSB can provide a constant stream of professional advice, assistance, but they don't, and especially with the county, they don't have to have a vote on the commission. They can still provide the input as they should. I'm glad to see the Little Hoover Commission is dealing with this. Perhaps if we move forward with this today, that we consider sending a letter not only to a representative and the, I guess the next step in the assembly process, but also copy the Little Hoover Commission with our concerns, so that they're aware of what we're worried about. So I am supportive of sending a letter of opposition, and we should do that soon. So is there a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion to send a letter of opposition and copy Cal LAFCO, the Little Hoover Commission, and our representative.
Do I have a second to the motion? Motion and a second. There's discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, roll call vote.
Commissioner Guyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavanino?
Aye.
Commissioner Morehouse?
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson? Commissioner Welt?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Chair Seves?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, now we have a number of bills where there's recommended opposition and support, and there's a number of them. So rather than have Mr. Hood go through every single one of them, is there a particular one that you want to pull to discuss? Or do we want to concur with staff's recommendation on the position? Because most of these positions that I understand are consistent with Cal LAFCO's recommendations.
That's correct. There's one bill that I believe is, rather than, I think that's Senate Bill 634, that Cal LAFCO is, rather than recommending opposition, its recommendation is oppose with amendments. And that's because with the creation of the Santa Clarita Valley Water District, the author has included the LAFCO process in that in those deliberations. So now it's a matter of working out the details on that. So that's the only change from my recommendations in the staff report.
Okay. Are there any
oppose with amendment, unless amended? Yeah.
Oppose unless amended. Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know the Senate Bill 448, it's the second one. It was right under the one we just talked about. It has to do with inactive or idle district. And it just caught my attention because of Santa Rita Hills. Doesn't this bill provide more opportunities or more latitude to LAFCO to dissolve a district?
I think the...
or is it just the opposite?
It's just the opposite,
okay.
Actually, because it doesn't go through the LAFCO process. It requires LAFCO to dissolve a special district that's determined to be inactive or idle, whatever idle means. I guess that's, if it hasn't done anything for 10 years, then it would be required to be dissolved by LAFCO without going through our usual process of a special study and, making a determination if it should be dissolved or not. So that's the reason, and It kind of dovetails a little bit with the Little Hoover Commission's recommendations, but it is one that Cal LAFCO is opposed to unless it's amended to include the full LAFCO process. So I hope that explains it.
Well, go ahead, Mr. Morehouse.
Mr. Guyer, then Mr. Morehouse.
Yeah, 448, I think the opposition, it definitely would help with Santa Rita Hills, but the problem with it was if you had a setting board and a district that was in operation and LAFCO decided to dissolve it, the board itself, the way the law is written now, would not have the ability to be able to oppose it. And that, I think that was CSDA's position with it, was they should be able to at least represent themselves to LAFCO as to why it shouldn't be dissolved. So that's the amendment that they're working for.
Mr. Morehouse.
Yeah, I don't believe this bill helps with the Santa Rita Hills issue because one of the issues is if you have a fund, you have money in the bank, then it can't be dissolved and they have money in the bank. So it doesn't help us there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that my understanding of how state mandates work as applied to LAFCO is correct. It is my understanding that the constitutional protections against unfunded state mandates that apply to cities, counties, and special districts do not apply to LAFCO, but that LAFCOs are some kind of authority or agency of the state that is allowed to pursue the, I'll call it, for lack of a better adjective, Himalayan process for getting reimbursements for state mandates under the government code. So that, for example, if one of these, 448, imposes, I think, a number of unfunded mandates on LAFCO, and we would, to get our money back, have to go through a fairly lengthy process to do it. We're not protected by the Constitution, if that's correct. We might call that this potential sizable unfunded mandates to the attention if we're going to oppose this bill.
Okay. Anybody else? Then would we entertain a motion to approve staff's recommendation on Senate Bill 448, AB 1725, AB 464, AB 979, Senate Bill 365, and Senate Bill 634.
I'll move it.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Guyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavanino?
Aye.
Commissioner Morehouse? Commissioner Richardson?
Aye.
Commissioner Welch?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Chair Seves?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Mr. Hood, would you cover the second item, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What I'm asking the commission to do is to take a look at the 2017 legislative policies from Cal LAFCO and use those as a guide for Santa Barbara LAFCO. We did this a year or so ago, but the policies are kind of dated now. I think it was 2015 or 16. It gives us some kind of discretion, at least, as far as moving ahead with the next item on the agenda, but it gives the legislative committee some direction as far as LAFCO, Cal LAFCO's legislative policies, and gives us, rather than adopt our own individual legislative policies, we can refer back to Cal LAFCO's policies, and I've given you a copy of those. And I think, having looked at them several times, I think they're very good. So it would at least be used as a guide to Santa Barbara LAFCO until we decide if we want to do our own policies or not.
Questions from the Commissioner, Mr. Hood, on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve his recommendation?
So move.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on adopting the Cal LAFCO legislative policies? Seeing none, roll call.
Commissioner Guyer?
Aye. Well, actually, you'd be sitting in, so as a voting member.
Commissioner Iskanian? Commissioner Lavanino?
Aye.
Commissioner Morehouse? Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Welch,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf, Chair Sevi.
Aye. Okay, item number 3.
I think it would also, as your executive officer, be helpful if you could authorize me to send position letters on pending legislation. That many times we have requests from LAFCO for a call to action, and I am reluctant to send the letter, even though the bill may comply with the LAFCO legislative policies. But I think this policy would authorize me to do that. Submit letters on positions that do not support unfunded mandates and are in compliance with the LAFCO legislative policy. And without, coming back to the commission, because many times that's, once a month and it doesn't really fit in logically with the time frame. But allowing me to consult with the chairman or vice chair when it does not allow time for approval by the commission at a regular commission meeting. I think that you know my position on this legislation, and I'd really like to have your authority to send these letters and weigh in, when it's clearly not in the best interests of Santa Barbara LAFCO or LAFCOs in general. So I'm asking that we approve this, and I guess we would put it into our handbook or some policy statement, but that's what I'd like you to do if possible.
Commissioner Wolf.
Are there any public speakers?
Chair Sevis and members of the commission, no further requests to speak.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we authorize our executive officer to send position letters on pending legislation for our own legislative policy.
Second. I'll second it, but I have a question.
Okay, if I can ask for an amendment, if we can add that the commission will be copied on all letters that are submitted.
Yes, I'll make that change, and I should have said it also includes consultation with a chair.
And
Or
vice chair.
chair.
Chair or vice chair, whoever's available. Okay, Mr. Guyer.
Okay, is this going to be as a resolution or just as a policy?
This is, it's just a policy, I understand.
Yeah, I think it would be just the policy.
So it'll go in our policy manual?
Yeah, it would go in our policy manual. I'm just looking for a good spot to put it.
Anybody else?
May I make one tiny suggestion, Mr. Chair? Instead of saying allow approval by the commission or consideration by the commission, if I understand it, when this is to be exercised, it's only when the nature of the legislation is such that you just don't have time to get feedback from the commission to encounter the changes. And maybe consideration captures that a little better.
I'm sorry, I missed what word you wanted to change.
Instead of approval, it says when time does not allow consideration instead of approval by the commission at a regular meeting. I don't think it's a substantive change, but I think it captures the tone a little better.
Does the maker of the motion approve the change from approval to consideration?
Yes.
Does a second approve that? Okay, so the motion then is amended. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Guyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavanino?
Aye.
Commissioner Morehouse? Commissioner Richardson? Commissioner Welch?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Chair Sevis.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, Mr. Hood, item number 4.
Mr. Chairman, last item on this staff report is an update on the Little Hoover Commission. And the Little Hoover Commission has been meeting regularly. They met last week, and they had asked me to consult with the chairman of the Little Hoover Commission. At least Pedro Nava is a retired or past assemblyman that represented Santa Barbara, Ventura counties, and is the chairman of the Little Hoover Commission. And we may want to look at this as a possible meeting with him and some representatives of Santa Barbara LAFCO. But Little Hoover Commission is looking at streamlining the authority to dissolve inactive districts. And the last bill that we looked at that was an issue was probably fashioned after the Little Hoover Commission's considerations. The terms of commissioners not allowing random removal, they would have fixed terms of LAFCO commissioners and could not be removed until that term is up. Update on the Principal Act of the Community Development Department, community needs assessments, and a variety of things that would streamline the LAFCO process. It wasn't this way until about a month or a month and a half ago, and then after one meeting with the Little Hoover Commission, a whole bunch of recommendations came out, and it certainly got Cal LAFCO's attention. And so I just throw this out as an information and an update to what's happening with the Little Hoover Commission, and they are made up of a variety of elected senators and assembly people and some appointed representatives. And Pedro Nava was just reappointed as the chairman of that Little Hoover Commission, and he, for your information, was at one of the CSDA meetings a couple of years ago and gave a very interesting talk about what the Little Hoover Commission was doing, and it didn't include any of this at that time. So they're expanding as far as the authority, but it's very interesting that we might want to sit down with him and talk about what the end product might be, and since he's local and would be available. So I don't know if any commissioners have any comments on this, but that concludes my comment.
Any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm puzzled by numbers 4 and 5 about HCD and its relationship to LAFCO.
I guess as far as regional plans and Housing and Community Development Act, there's a lot of interest now in DUCs.
In what?
Unincorporated disadvantaged communities. And there's legislation that would bypass LAFCO if there are some DUCs within a reasonable vicinity of an annexation, that they would need to be included in the annexation. And so, Housing and Community Development is the one that sets those standards. So they need to be reviewed as far as the LAFCO Act and LAFCO legislation, so that they're included, but not, allow LAFCO to make decisions on that based on, our own guidelines and state law.
Right.
Okay. Just from my perspective, I'd like to see where they're going with this, maybe get an update from Cal LAFCO. And at the very minimum, maybe you and I set up a meeting with him so we report back to the commission as to what they see on the radar. Okay, anything?
Just one comment, and I want to thank the commission for taking action on 2, B, and C, because it really helps the legislative committee move forward and have more productive meetings going forward. So I really appreciate it. Gives us some good guidance.
Good. Okay. Commissioner announcements or requests for future agenda items?
Yeah, future agenda item.
Mr. Guyer.
Yeah, I'd like to see on a future agenda item a review and an analysis of the fee schedule.
Mr. Richardson.
I want to apologize to the commission for arriving late. I've been in public office for 13 years, served on many boards in the council, and this is the very first time I've ever been late. And it's a record that I lost. But I have an excuse. Don't drive 154. A 25-minute delay killed me.
Well, sorry. A couple of things. You're going to have to deal with Commissioner Waterfield on this one, because you unseated her when she was ready to serve in your position. And also, I missed you in the flag. Okay, and we got Mr. Guyer's request on the fee schedule discussion. We'll see when we can fit that in.
His mic breaks up.
Okay, Mr. Hood, your comment.
I just had a couple of quick comments. There is a
So this is
special districts legislative days on May 16th and 17th at in Sacramento, and Cal LAFCO is partnering with the special district on that. Pamela Miller will be participating in a panel with the Speaker of the Assembly's policy consultant and some other representatives, CSAC and some others. And there is a panel with Pedro Nava, as well as the chairman of the Assembly Local Government Committee. So I've been advised that I should let the commissioners know about this event in Sacramento, May 16th and 17th. And they would be, the commissioners, if they are interested, let me know. I know special districts will probably be attending on behalf of special districts, but it might be informative to go up and attend this session in Sacramento. No, it's kind of short notice, but we just got notice fairly recently, the end of April. And also,
I was going to go, but I'm actually getting married on the 20th, so I want to keep the new wife happy.
You can't postpone that a week?
If she likes you, she'll love Cal LAFCO conferences.
She's been to one.
Okay, anything else,
just
Mr.?
one, yeah, just sorry to, but there's an article in the California Special Districts magazine that was written by Pamela Miller, and I'll send that out to you by email. And lastly, we are trying to schedule a protest hearing for the Los Olivos CSD, and we need to send out notices to all of the registered voters and trying to get that in the next few weeks. I need to give 21 days notice, but I also need to have a list of registered voters, and I was advised by the county elections that we can't use the old list because registered voters lists change on a daily basis. So we can't send out the one that we used for the notice last month. So as soon as we get that schedule, we'll hold that protest hearing. So, and then if that is less than 50% protest, it would be scheduled for an election that would be coming up, mail ballot election on that issue that we looked at a few weeks ago. That's all I had.
All righty. Then we're going to adjourn. Our next meeting will be Thursday, June 1st in Santa Maria. We are adjourned.